here from all over North America, Canada and the US, New Zealand and India.
Okay.
Well, Jack, I want you can fade out the music and let's welcome these good people.
Well, I guess it's that time, isn't it? So, welcome to Ideas That Matter 2023. And today we are going to be focused on circles, which is something we all need. And boy, it couldn't be a better time. Just a quick background, Ideas That Matter has an evolution because was started by Inclusion Press way back in the early 80s when a team of colleagues were doing some writing and things and workshops, and we couldn't find anyone to publish or even pay any attention, so we just decided to do it ourselves. So that became Inclusion Press. And we tried to talk a bunch of universities into paying attention to inclusion, and they weren't interested then. So we invented the Summer Institutes. 34 years later, we, 34 years later, COVID arrived. So doing face-to-face institutes with what turns out over time to be perhaps 10,000 people from every continent except Antarctica. We decided we couldn't do it that way. So in 2021, we did a virtual one, and that was the last of that particular model. But the energy of being able to do this online has resulted in this invention, another prototype, Ideas That Matter, where we're looking to have conversations and presentations and engagement with people who have powerful stories to share that we can all learn from. And today, we are highly privileged to have the Fialka Feldman family. Janice and Rich are here. They are the proud parents of Micah and Emma, each of whom are uniquely and remarkably accomplished. Janice is a nationally recognized speaker and an acclaimed author, a poet, a brilliant child advocate, and a very wise mother. Rich worked on the line with the United Auto Workers, and then later on as a union steward, and his organizing abilities have continued into the future as he has been collaborating with the Bog Center since its inception and continues that work of leadership on issues of change. And he's one of Micah's buddies. Today we're going to have Emma. And today is Emma's birthday, no less. She is a brilliant teacher and now an elementary school principal in Boston. And in addition to her birthday, she just was married in September, and Micah spoke at her wedding with Alyssa. And then there's Micah. Micah's a brilliant self-advocate who has, with support, gone from triumph to triumph to triumph. And he is currently a teaching assistant at Syracuse University. And so we have a family who have struggled with travails, but have created stories of success and inspiration for all of us. It's our privilege to welcome Janice and Rich, and I think Emma will be joining us, and the star of the show, Micah, is already here.
I want to invite us to just settle in and just center ourselves and bring ourselves home. Just take your seat and settle into the space we can create together for the next 2 hours. we really invite you to bring your full attention, intention, and presence to your inner space and extend your energy and grace to one another. I was struck by a quote from Martin Luther King that helps me settle into this space. And it is that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Thank you, Martin Luther King. We are so grateful to the Fialka Feldman family to so generously share their wisdom. And Janice, you shared a poem with Jack and me that, Jack, I know you want to also share with the group before we pass it to Janice and Rich and the family.
This poem is by Lynn Ungar, and it's called Breathe. Breathe, said the wind. How can I breathe at a time like this when the air is full of smoke and burning tires and burning lives? Just breathe, the wind insisted. Easy for you to say if the weight of injustice isn't wrapped around your throat and cutting off your air. I need you to breathe. I just need you to breathe. Don't tell me to be calm when there's so many reasons to be angry, so much cause for despair. I didn't say to be calm, said the wind. I said, breathe. We're going to need a lot of air to get us through this hurricane together.
Without further ado, I want to pass it to you, Janice. And I want to remind folks, you're in charge of the view that you have. You can, if you're on a laptop, the upper right corner will enable you to see a speaker view or the entire gallery view.
Good to be here. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I'm going to start with a quote and then into thank yous, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. This is our son, Micah. Hi, Micah, but about 28 years ago. And like all parents or caregivers, we wanted him to have a quality life, which meant many things, but certainly included friends, community, network, and a sense of belonging. I dare say that for the most part, with the help of so many people, many of them on this Zoom today, Micah has a very strong community where he does feel that he belongs. And so I just remind us of what this circle of friends concept is, approach to life is. It's really about bringing people together. We weren't sure if Micah was going to be able to join us, but he has created much of this PowerPoint. And Micah, if there's something you want to say, just let us know, okay? And we'll get you involved. The reason that our family knew about Circle of Friends and maps and so many other things is because of the people who pioneered this. The folks that Jack mentioned and Linda mentioned. Jack and Marcia in those early years for our family, Judah Snow, and with great grace and elegance and wisdom, Linda and Jack. We dance, as I say, in a circle of gratitude and reciprocity as well. We would not be here sharing what we've learned without all of these people and that whole community of the Summer Institute and more. So what are we going to do today? We're going to talk a little bit about help, which we could do for a really long time because it's such a complicated experience, way of being in the world. We'll talk a little bit about Micah's circle over the past 30 years. He's now 39 years old, but he's had a circle of sorts over 3 decades. We'll talk a little bit about why circles matter from the family perspective, as well as the school setting. And hopefully Emma will be able to join us if there isn't any urgent issue at her school. We promised that we wouldn't sing happy birthday to her, but we will wish her happy birthday. We'll talk about some of the principles of circles. And as you're listening to us share a little bit about Micah's story, pay attention to when you might hear about intentionality and invitation, and why it is important to include or to adhere to the interest of the person who's primarily the center of the circle. You'll hear us say a few times the importance of interdependency. We live in this myth that we are independent. You will hear us talk about that the circle has an impact on all who are in the circle or close to the circle. And the last I we included is the importance, at least in our family, of having a facilitator. And we'll end with ways to cultivate, create, and maintain circles. We have an opportunity also to do at least one, maybe 2 small group conversations as well. There are a lot of resources that you will receive at the end, and we encourage you to use the chat as well. So Rich and I, our intention is that we hope that this time together will strengthen your interest or your already current work. Many of you have been doing circles way beyond 30 years as well. We hope that you recognize one next step that you might do, which might be practical, but it also may be sort of a philosophical aspect to what it takes to bring people into our circle and create that sense of belonging. And then we hope you fall in love with this idea of learning to act with intentionality, learning to cherish, if you will, the whole concept of asking for help or reaching out. In many ways, I've learned over the years from Micah and from the disability community at large that asking for help, being able to reach out, has really been a superpower. And that's not always been easy, because at least for me, I was raised in an atmosphere where I was supposed to pull myself up by the bootstraps. I was the one to be giving help, not receiving help. So I had to really think through some of these issues that were fundamental to the way I was thinking. So I'm going to share with you one of my favorite quotes about this. To hell with bootstraps, for surely we need to swoop in on most days and save or support each other. So maybe you too might one day, give that mantra, to hell with bootstraps. So I'm going to pass it over to my wise husband, who keeps me thinking of issues from a much broader perspective. We just found this quote today, so we're sharing it. So Richie, take it away, and look forward to hearing your ideas.
Thank you, Janice, Jack and Linda, and everybody who's here. The quote is, "We are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness." Thich Nhat Hanh. And I think when we think about help, we think about the vulnerability, the courage, the strength, the risk it takes for someone to ask another person to help, to be supportive, to say, I can't do this alone. The opportunity that question creates is an opportunity for us to create community, to create interconnectedness. But what I want to say is, many of us on this phone, on this Zoom, are often the helpers rather than the ones asking for help. And that too often is a power relationship rather than a transforming relationship for both the person asking for help and the person providing the opportunity for help and community building and interconnectedness. And I want to emphasize that because one of the stigmas around help is that you're subservient to the person giving it or creating the opportunity. And I think that's a lot because of the professionalization that has happened with the institutions, which have not included that you are transforming yourself as much as you are creating opportunity for someone else to transform themselves and reach their potential as a human being in their greatest potential. And I just want to close with a quote. Many of you, because you're involved in inclusion and disability work and disability justice, are familiar with the Boggs Center in New Jersey. I am a member of the James and Grace Lee Boggs Center in Detroit, and one of the most important quotes that have raised me for 50 years is a quote by James Boggs that says, "I am nobody except in relationship to a whole lot of other bodies." And that's why help is such a critical word for interdependence. Thank you. Back to you, Janice.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. So we want to invite you for probably about 30 seconds to just reflect, pause, and perhaps this question will invite some of your own ideas. You might want to journal or doodle or just ponder or just breathe. What makes it hard to ask for help, to engage others, or acknowledge a need? What challenges you at various points? So this will be silence for about 25 seconds. And so I will pause now and invite you to just reflect and pause. And now I will interrupt your reflection, and feel free to jot down a few words actually in the chat as well. So we might see what other people are saying about what is that challenge. And this might be a question that you take into your own personal thinking in the morning or in the evening or in your small groups or professional development, because I think it's so important. One of the things that I often say is I'm learning how to ask for help without apology, but with dignity and grace. This is an underpinning of what circles are about. So you've heard a little bit about our family. We used to be a family of 4. Micah and Emma grew up with us in Michigan. They no longer live here. How dare they move so far away? And we are now a Fialka Feldman family of 5. Emma and Alyssa married in July. So we're thrilled to be able to share some of this, and we're getting ready for winter. So there you are. We are dressed in the clothes that will be a part of our life. So now we want to tell a little bit about Micah's journey as well. So many years ago, he didn't start out this way, but he had these wonderful chubby cheeks. And the world gave him all of these labels that made it so hard for us to even see our child for a while. Primary expressive speech and language disorder, developmental dyspraxia. A lot of those came in those early years, and as time went on, more and more labels. Mentally retarded, cognitive impairment, on and on. Labels. The best label came from his sister Emma, who called Micah a political junkie because he loves politics. When Michael was in first grade, he was in a self-contained or a segregated classroom. Things seemed to be going fine. But one day Micah came home, and to our surprise, we should have known better. He turned to us and he said, "I want to go in the same door as my friends." He had noticed that he was being segregated and treated differently. And so the good news is that this came at a time when inclusion, through pioneering efforts of many people, some on this Zoom here, was really burgeoning. And we were there ready to learn about this thing. How do we include Micah, since that was his dream, into regular education? And there are many things that we learned, but for this Zoom here, we will just talk mainly about the circle of friends. So Micah's circle began in 3rd grade, and none of us knew what to do. we didn't, it was a foreign concept to even identify the person with a disability back then, right? Everybody wanted to be hush hush, but as we all know, kids see the differences as well as the similarities. So the social worker, who was a bit tentative, but he agreed to try this out. He went to Micah's class. Michael was there, and they talked about friends. Why do we have friends? What do we like to do with our friends? How do we make friends? And so it was a friendship conversation. And then a week later, he went back and talked to the kids. Michael wasn't in that grade at that moment, or in that class at that moment, that with our permission. And the social worker said, we want to start a circle of friends, and we want to support a young person in your class who, I don't know the right words he used then, but probably they used special needs, who learned a little bit differently. And of course, everybody knew who it was, right? Kids understand that. And so in a sense, he named it. So he said, oh, we're going to have fun once a week. We're going to meet and make sure that all of us feel included and have an opportunity to hang out together at school and maybe after school. So many kids volunteered. They were excited about this idea, or at least intrigued by it. And the kids met regularly. They planned different activities that they would do together. I think here they went to a soccer game. So in many ways, it was more like a student organization or a student group. But I want to tell you a story, I think, that was so fundamental to our understanding of the power of circles. In those early years, Micah didn't always have the words, but he wanted to be engaged with others. And he had this tendency to poke people's shoulders in order to get their attention. And it just irritated people at times, cut it out. And when we are irritated by someone, we tend to, pull away or push them away. So the social worker decided to have a conversation about what do we do when someone's irritating, and slowly and respectfully raise this whole issue with Micah and the circle. Sometimes, Mike, when you do this, it, irritates us. And Michael wasn't sure, from what we understood, exactly what was going on, but the kids were. And so they decided that they would brainstorm how to do this, or how to deal with this. And so the kids themselves came up with this idea. Hey, Michael, when you do this, we're going to put our hand up, and this will mean stop, and we'll connect with you in 5 minutes, something like that. And the kids role played it and had fun with it, and everybody took turns doing it. Did it work all the time? No. Did it work some of the time? Yes. And so here's the real gem in that story, or in that moment. The kids learned that they could respectfully talk to each other about uncomfortable situations. They could have those hard talks. And Micah began to learn, and we didn't know this for years, that the circle was a place that he could go to for ideas and support. He might not always like them, but it was a resource to him. So we wanted to share a little bit about how powerful that circle was. Okay, let's see. I'm going to move forward. All right, so for some reason, I'm frozen. All right, let me try it this way. Yeah, well, a few. All right, there we go. Okay. The circle continued through middle school and high school. It changed in its composition. It wasn't always the same students by any means. Some circle gatherings were 3 kids and some were 10, depending on whether sometimes we served pizza or brownies or something. But in two stories. So in middle school, one of the kids noticed that there was a new student in this who came into the school who was from another country and didn't have a lot of words in English. And one of the middle school boys said, he doesn't have friends. Why don't we invite him into the circle? So we were beginning to understand that the circle became a place where kids knew that they could create a sense of belonging or connections as well. In high school, mainly it became a gathering where Mike practiced with the speech therapist questions that he would ask the other students, like, what are you doing over the weekend? What music are you listening to? Things that maybe didn't easily come easily to Micah. The students would tell us how much they enjoyed these circles as well. So two quick stories, one that occurred again, just to give you a sense of the impact. Micah, and these are stories he's given us full permission to tell. And Micah, if for some reason you don't want us to, you just leap in and tell us to not talk. But when Micah used to go to the school dances, he loved hanging out with the teachers because they connected with him with great ease. The circle noticed that Micah wasn't hanging out with his classmates. And so they gave him an assignment that says, Micah, you need to, at the next school dance with 5 girls. And he did. He danced with 5 girls. And then he went back to talk to the teachers. But you see again the engagement, what he was learning, what the other students were learning, and being engaged as well. So yeah, so I think that those are a couple of stories. I certainly could tell a few more, but we did not know how important the circles were to Micah's life. Well, I'll tell you a story in just a minute, so I'll lead you there. So Micah began a couple more pieces of his story. Micah was part of the new wave of students who, with intellectual disabilities, who were going to college. This is a brand new thing that was occurring for the most part. And we were able to create a fully inclusive program at Oakland University. This is the one in Michigan, not California. So Micah took 2 buses up and 2 buses back at the university and was there for a couple of years. Eventually, after Micah noticed that his sister moved into the dorm, he said, I don't want to take those buses. I want to live in the dorm. And it's a very long story, which you can read more about in our publication. Initially, the university said yes, and then they said no. On the day that we received the email that said Micah cannot live in the dorm, because basically they were saying he wasn't really a student, even though he was enrolled through a special program. On that day, it just so happened that Micah's circle was meeting. So Micah came into that meeting. He said, they're not going to let me live in the dorm. And the circle said, no way, Micah, we're going to support you. And they planned rallies and did a petition. 1,000 people signed them. They went to the board of trustees. So that experience empowered Micah as well as the student body to get involved as well. Eventually, 2-year-long battle, Micah moved into the dorm. He became CNN's most intriguing person of the day, and that sort of catapulted him into the limelight. So he began to speak nationally, which took him to Syracuse University. I'm almost finished with this part of the storytelling. He decided that he wanted to move to Syracuse because, as he said to us, they get me here. They had a strong disability studies program. And when Micah told us that he wanted to move to Syracuse, he also said on his own, without any prompting from anybody, and here he is in front of the School of Education, if I'm going to live in Syracuse, then I know I need to create my circle. So it was in his bones, this concept of intentionally asking for support, for ideas as well. Rich, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add at this point. We're going to move into small groups in a minute, but I wanted to be open to that. And of course, Micah, if there's anything you wanted to add. This is Micah's circle at Syracuse when it was meeting at the university. And you can actually watch this circle and other activities or involvement of 3 individuals in the documentary Intelligent Lives. So open to you before we move.
Just share that I think fundamental for us as a family was It was significant that we were children of the 60s, so we were involved with social movements of the 60s. We saw what it meant when people came together in advocacy and struggle and community from the civil rights movement onward. And I think significantly when Janice was too busy and I had the chance to introduce Micah at a conference or something, I would say there were three principles that raised Micah. One, great expectations, and we did not mean material success, but great expectations for him to reach his potential. Two, education was a lifelong process. We didn't mean schooling. And three, it was how the community changed to create opportunity. So we always saw that as critical because it was about relationship building, and critical connections.
Yeah. And I see, Micah, you raised your hand.
Sure.
Go for it.
Yeah, I had some time because I was quiet at work, but yeah, I like moved 550 miles away, and I have a great circle. We meet once every other month. We have a meeting at the at like the at like the end of this month, and if anyone ever wants to come to the meeting, they're very fun. They're only 1 hour, and we're done by 8:01. And I have learned how to balance my weekend of going to events and then just hanging out and watching football and just like relaxing. And if people want to find me on Facebook, I post great things, and I have to leave around 1:50, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm really glad you could be part of this. And we have some ideas that are in the PowerPoint too. You know, I do want to make one comment, and then we're going to move into small groups so you have a time to have a conversation. When I describe this circle and I zoom through 39 years of his life, what I don't want to give the impression is this was easy, that it worked brilliantly, that we always knew what we were doing. That is not the case at all. As Micah knows, because he's heard us talk about this, in those at various points, the circle would meet, and the weekends still were not necessarily filled with activities for Micah to do. There were times when just two people would show. There were times when the circle didn't seem to be engaged at all. So as we'll say later on, closer to 3, it's so important to reflect and to think. But I think fundamentally, in part because we are connected to the whole Inclusion Press folks, is that we just kept going, kept believing that this was right. So with that, so here's your opportunity to share some ideas. I'm not sure the 6 minutes is right, but your small group conversation, we might actually, I think we're going to go 8 or 9 minutes as well. But here are 2 prompts, and however you might respond to these or anything else, it's your group. So we're thinking that, what did you hear in Micah's story or from your own experience that's important to creating circles and inviting support? What did you hear or notice or feel? And or you might respond to, what's the role of asking for help, and what does it take to invite others into our circle? So I'll pass it on to, I think, Linda, right? For mixing us up and doing the magic, getting us into the small groups.
That's great, Janice. Thank you. I'm going to open the breakout rooms. I will broadcast the 2 questions, Janice, that you've framed. We're inviting people to just make space and share in turn. The groups are in 2 or 3s. And I'll post the questions again in a broadcast. And we'll have about 9 minutes and then there'll be notice to close. Enjoy the conversation with each other. I'm gonna welcome back, everyone. I'm Janice. I'm putting you back on Spotlight. And who am I bringing with you, Rich?
All right. Yeah, and then pretty soon, Emma. I think she's here too, but
Emma's in the house, and
yeah.
when it's time for Emma, I will
Okay, great.
bring her up.
All right. Looks like the timing is going well. Well, I'm going to start with a cartoon just to bring you all back here. It's one of my favorite, and then we're going to open it up to the large group for a couple of comments as well. I hope your conversations were as rich as my small group was. So help is complicated, as we all know and experience. Here's one of my favorite cartoons. So Lassie calls is there on the dock, and Timmy, a man, is drowning, and he says, Lassie, Lassie, get help. And Lassie goes to get help, but not necessarily the kind of help that we all need. So part of asking for help or supporting is making sure that we clarify what is the kind of help that we might need as well. So for a little bit of humor. So I want to open it up to the large group, and maybe we could take 2, 3 comments. You don't need to summarize the whole conversation, but was there something that really struck you, or was an aha moment, or you heard someone say something? So all you need to do is raise your hand, and Linda will find you, and I think unmute you, or however that works.
Janice, I
so
just want to ask you, Janice, I want to ask you, do you want to stop the presentation a minute so we can, and then
sure.
And we can see everyone.
Good.
And
Thank you.
your son Micah has his hand raised. You could
Okay, great.
him.
Good. Go for it, Micah.
I had a fun group, and we talked about circles, and I shared with them about what I do, and I shared that when I was younger, I would like be I would try to hang out, but now on the weekends, by Friday or Saturday, it's okay if I'm not busy. I like just hanging out and not doing 20 things or 30 things.
You're finding your way of how you want to be, and not necessarily your mother's way, right?
No, yeah.
Very good. I'm so glad you could join us, Micah.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was fun. I have to go now, but it was fun seeing you all. Goodbye.
Oh, good. Great, great, good. And
Thank you,
Micah, will you be available if someone has a question or wants to talk to you more?
They
At
can
another-
email me or send me a Facebook message.
Okay, great. That would be wonderful. You could be
Thank
the
you.
consultant.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Goodbye,
great.
everyone.
Sorry, my apologies. I'll just comment that I think it was really nice to see that, that it's nice to recognize, you talked about it's just not always easy, and our chat was kind of about Lucinda and Janice and I were in the same group and chatting about how the circle had come up with ideas and things were tried in terms of looking at something, and then hearing some other ideas to keep trying that we know that, from Micah's circle, you've experienced, Janice, and really back to that, to keep at it in go back at it in a different way. Circles don't mean you have everything solved. It means you chat about it, reflect, and then keep going at it. And so that message was, I think, pretty strong and a good one in our group. Lived experience for all of us, probably.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So yes. And also reaching out to other people to guide us when I'm stuck. That whole ripple of seeking support is important. Jennifer.
Okay. We have done some form of circles throughout my now 23-year-old son's life, and it was very helpful to hear your input. One of the challenges that we talked about a bit in our group is that it's easy to get people of my generation, you know, the parents, the aunts, uncles, grandparents to be involved, and how challenging it's been at many times to have peers involved. So it was very heartening to hear how you were able to do that, and I'm curious to hear more as the presentation goes on.
Yeah, there's no simple recipe, as you well know, right? I think sometimes focusing on what is the interest of the person. Norman Coons, who many of you know from Credo for Support and many other things, really has driven that home for us. What was Micah interested in? For a while, it was the Democratic Party, and when he was younger, going to football games. So trying to seek that avenue as the way to find the fertile ground where other people might come in. And, this is a little bit uncomfortable, but it is true. When Michael was in high school and other times, we learned about what was National Honor Society, where people had to do volunteer work. And it churned my stomach to think that in some ways, and Micah's heard me tell this story as well, that Micah was a volunteer project, right? But what we found is that those young people who had to provide some sort of service, and that service was to hang out with Micah every week, that some of them learned things about being in community with people who are different. And the story I'll share about that is there was one kid who, you could see put in his 59 minutes every week with Micah and then scooted out the door. Several years later, he became a physician, and he emailed us and he said, I want you to know that those times working with Micah taught me that it wasn't enough just to be nice to him, that I had to find ways to genuinely include him. So my churning of the stomach around the volunteer kind of project stuff, which some of you might take a different opinion, it sometimes can lead to transformation and growth in ways we didn't expect. So I share that as well. And also we learned trying not to have just one person. So we might have two people come together and hang out with Micah. So, and I'm very happy to share more beyond this PowerPoint as well, or beyond this Zoom today as well. Thank you for bringing up that idea, Jennifer. I appreciate it. One more. Oh, Rich is gonna, yep, you've got your hand raised. I see it. Thank you.
I just want to add, I think, and I don't know anybody else's story or anybody else's situation. It's because when you're in school, you have peers till high school. Other than that, the only institutions or places where there's any sense of could be peer relationships, if there's a church or a religious institution that has youth organizations. And the second is university campuses where there's youth organizations. Otherwise you have to really search for it. And Mike has been fortunate in that he ended up on a campus. And there are peers there. It's much more difficult. You have to really, if it's not that, then how do you find that peer organization of movies or basketball or something? I don't know what the disability is for inclusion, but so Micah's choices and what he wanted to do from after high school, a university provides that space that doesn't often happen. So that's a uniqueness for Micah.
Yeah, and thank you. And then to build on that, I think that
let me just say, community does not exist. So when we say we want to involve them in the community, it's a myth because people only do it when it's convenient. So the numbers, we have to create community through the work that we're doing.
Yeah, and I think that at least in our family, that being more public, supporting people to tell their own story with PowerPoint. Micah learned very early. He wasn't always able to sort of connect with people, but he began to have these 10-slide PowerPoints, which he would then, share with other groups, and that engaged them. So having our opportunity for our kids, if you will, or our adult children to tell their story in public, maybe to a class in social work, or public health, or speech and language master's programs, where they tell their story, and then sometimes those connections are being made as well. So a whole nother is another direction. So I think we have time for one more question or comment. Now, thank you so much. It makes it so much enriching when we can engage. Anyone else? I think Dave may be raising his head. Yeah.
I just want to share just a little bit because it relates to circles. First of all, one of the things about Janice and Rich and Emma and Micah is that they believe that asking for help is actually good for everybody. So it's not just good for Micah, it's going to be good for somebody else. But a little story. We had the chance to spend some time with Micah a few years ago at his house, along with his family and a whole crew of people. And in that process, stuff happened, and somebody else that lives in Syracuse learned about it. And the short story about this is that this young man, 14 years old, lives in Syracuse, going to high school for the first time. His grandmother called Patty Scott, my wife, and was so compelling about her belief in her grandson and her belief in what she's seen and got to know about Micah, that it was compelling enough to set up a time to gather a group of people together. And we met with Micah on the weekend on our way back, and Micah helped. Micah was in the support circle. But the thing about it is that sometimes you're the person to ask, and sometimes somebody else is the person to ask and invite. And in this case, his grandmother was just passionate,
Yeah, thank you, Dave. It was so important to hear that, and you and Patty have played such an important role in Micah's circle. It just keeps rippling, right? Yeah. So all right, we're going to move on reluctantly, because I really appreciate the conversation. So, all right, you're sharing your screen. Okay. Yes. So that's interesting. All right. Let me. Now we're going to go into next. All right. All right. Good. Okay. Why the circles matter. I mean, you're already getting a good sense of why they matter for Micah. Siblings, you're going to hear Emma a couple of times. We'll talk a little bit. But if Micah wasn't here, we wanted to bring in his voice. And he always says, start a circle of friends. It's never too late. I tell my adult friends, start a circle. In the early years, Micah always served pizza. Right now on Zoom, that's pretty hard to do. But he knows that circle is one of the best things that have happened to in his life. He knows that his circle is there to plan and support him. The last paragraph I'll just read. A couple of years ago, Micah says, I wanted to start dating. I was excited and scared. I talked it over with my circle. They helped me do practice dating. We all need that, or needed that. I got less scared and started dating. And I will tell you that what I think one of the best things the circle told Micah is, don't order spaghetti on your first date. So, they can be very practical as well. So I'm glad Micah could join us as well. So why circles matter for siblings. All right, I'm going to bring in, I can't wait to see my daughter. It's her birthday today. I assume you're still here. So Emma, graciously share your wisdom and thoughts. There she is.
Hello, good to see you all. I've been listening and getting a little bit of work done, so this has been a real treat. Thanks so much for making a space to have these important conversations. I'm going to first wear the hat of being a sibling. And I think pictures are important because they remind us that we're not always the same age as we are right now, which is always humbling on one's birthday. So I start with the photo of me in the bottom left-hand corner of me nestled against Micah's head as a way to share that Micah is older than me. And he's 4 years older. And so the first thing when I think about why circles matter to siblings, it's a very intentional and explicit way for me to see that my brother belongs. A lot of thoughts I have, even as an adult, is trying to assess who's really Micah's friend. And we know when kids are young, one way they assess friendship is by seeing them interact with other people. And so circles matter because it's a very visible way for me to see that my brother has community. Later, it becomes more complex to understand like who's really his friend. Do they mean it in a condescending way? All those layers go on to it. But when I'm little, just seeing him with other people matters. And that happens through intentionally creating friendships. And I'll also just add, as I get older and Micah gets older, and that means we all get older, thinking about what responsibility looks like as Micah gets older and my parents pass away, and how does the care and love and support that my parents have provided for him, how does that maintain and not just fall on my shoulders? And so circles matter because they give me a very visible way to see that I'm not alone, that there are many people who care about Micah, that people come in and out of his life. And so there are ways that I can do that to foster that as he gets older, but to also see that I'm not going to do this by myself. We did a workshop as a family a number of years ago, and I was still in college, and I remember sharing my fear about what would happen when my parents pass away. And everyone in that room talked about how they would each rotate spending like a month with Micah. Now, that might not actually be what happens, but it was a very visible way for me to see that there are people who care about him. And it's because it's been intentional year after year for Micah. And here we are still loving our moments and being silly. And so these are more recent adult photos of Micah and I, just as a way to share that these relationships evolve. So do circles, but continuing to have it year after year is an important way for me to see that I'm not alone in this work.
Emma, it's not totally related to circles, but I wonder if you might share just briefly what in middle school, how it felt, some of the feelings that you had about being with your friends and Micah.
Sure. I think
because I guess I'm asking him. Oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna have you go to the next part and then to you and Dad, and then I'll come back.
Say that again.
I'm gonna have you go to the parent part, and then I'll come back in and say that.
Okay.
Part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay. Great. All right. I'll leave that for another time. So, or for later on, because Emma's going to come back and talk about why it matters for school settings as well. How wonderful to be with her. Okay, so you've already heard, I think, in many ways, why circles matters to parents, caregivers as well. Somebody once shared with me that parents have two roles in life. Really, we have many, but one is to be the protector and the other is to be a guide. And initially, our primary role is one of protecting, which is a very active, engaging role where we make most of the decisions, especially in those early years. And it is, I think, true that for many parents who have kids with labels with disabilities, that we become very fierce protectors because we're always trying to push the envelope or anticipating hearing that your child can't do that, something like that. But whereas our children grow, however they may grow, we move from being not always the protector, but guide, which is much more of a standing back role. We may be involved, but we're not making the crucial decisions. We may be giving options and thoughts. And this is very fine dance. It's not easy to access to evaluate which one. But many times what parents hear, especially parents who have children with disabilities, is you have to learn how to let go, right? And a wise mother once said to me, it's not about letting go. I'm not going to ever totally let go. But she gave me this phrase that it's really learning how to hold on differently, to be involved without always being at the forefront, pushing, making the decisions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the ways that on my good day that I can move to be a little bit more of a guide is because I know that the circle of friends is there. I know that Micah can go to the circle. Hopefully they'll inform him, give him ideas of things that will support a quality life as well. And in fact, we now know that there's a term for what we try to practice, and that's called supported decision making. And there is a million of resources on the web about supported decision making now, even as a legal term. So here's one of my favorite stories to talk about in terms of supporting that circle of friends, which really means at times we have to step back. So as you have already heard, using this friendly map, Rich and I live in Detroit, and Micah lives in Syracuse, somewhere about 400 or so miles away from us. And several years ago, on a Friday night, we got a phone call from Micah saying, I saw this new cardiologist and he's going to call you tonight. And that surprised us. The short story is that the cardiologist did call us that night and said that Micah needed open heart surgery, not in the next day or two, but very soon. Needless to say, we were stunned. He was stunned. We didn't know exactly what to do, what to make of it. But terror was probably the dominant feeling in that moment as well. And many of you know that what I wanted to do was put on my Superman cape and fly immediately to Syracuse and be with Micah and hold him and support him. And we had a few minutes, Rich and I talked about, what do we do? What's important? Micah seemed stunned. He wasn't totally distressed. He was just almost in shock and really didn't know what it meant to have open heart surgery. So we had this conversation with Micah, and we thought that if we got in the car or flew out there that minute, that the circle would not step up, that they would rely on us, and we would probably become the main protector, if you will, or at least supporter of Micah. And so we talked with Mike, and of course we said, if you want us to come right now, we will. The other option is we could call a couple people in the circle and they could come and maybe you could stay with them over the next couple of days or something like that. And he said, no, call my circle. And he gave us the names of the people. We said, do you want to call them? He goes, no, you call them. And that circle for that week came together, strengthened their connections as they stepped up, if you will, with Micah as well. And eventually, obviously we did see Micah and he did come home for the surgery because it was a long recovery process as well. So I share that with you. And it's not like we always knew what was the right thing to do, but we had a core value that we had to engage the circle, and that guided us as well. So, Emma, you're back right on time. And so now you're going to put on your principal hat. And I don't know if you know, but I'm going to share with you, I think, what is the best thing in your office, and then you can take it. Someone gave this to Emma, and it says, being a principal is easy. It's like riding a bike, except the bike is on fire, you're on fire, everything's on fire. So there you have it. And I can move forward with the next slide if you want, or you can talk about fire.
I'll first start with the middle school story, and then I'll go back to
Okay,
schools.
great.
When I was in middle school, I think could be a typical feeling for pre-adolescent humans is the ease of embarrassment. Everyone seems to embarrass the individual who's going through those feelings. And that was heightened because of the way that Micah's disability impacted who he was and how he moved into space. What I've learned is that it has less to do with his disability and much more to do with ableism. But at that point, I was just embarrassed that he stuttered. I was embarrassed that he asked a lot of questions. I was embarrassed by the things that in many ways make him who he is. And I think this is what you're hinting at, Mom, is potentially one way the circle was a resource for me as a sibling was that I did not want to have Micah over when my friends were over. Am I telling the right story? Yeah. And so because Micah had intentional circles of support, he could be other places. So my family's managed my own feelings and working to maintain a healthy sibling relationship for the long haul by using his circle to also leverage some of the challenges that I was experiencing. So Micah still had a sense of belonging. It was somewhere else. And I could have a sense of belonging in my home and not have to deal with all the feelings that come with being a sibling at that age too. Yeah. Is that captured? Okay. So now I will put on the school hat. I made the I made the wild decision to go into school leadership right around the pandemic, and have been given the blessing of being a principal at one of the smallest schools in the Boston Public Schools. We have 130 kids, and I have gone through every feeling that is probably possible with making a career change, joy and pain and demoralization and stress. But the grounding principle of why I continue to show up is because I believe that in order for inclusion to live to its promise, schools have to be places where teachers are allowed to make mistakes, families are allowed to be honest with us, and kids are allowed to be their whole selves with us. And that's really hard. We don't do it well every day, but those are the beliefs that ground me and give me the to continue to show up. And I feel really grateful to do that with a staff of 30 some folks. Not easy. There is not one thing that makes it right, but a deep commitment is definitely what gives the foundation. And my beliefs deeply come from how I've seen Micah become who he is, and the belief that so much of schools and issues of segregation come from not believing and dreaming in something else. And Micah's story is so much about seeing what else is possible. So I'm going to share some stories of two individuals. This was when I was a teacher, but I share that framing to say we have to create schools where everything we do is intentional. Magic is a wonderful feeling, but it doesn't exist without intentionality. And for inclusion to work well for kids, for families, for staff, we have to be intentional, because so much of particularly individuals with disabilities is that their lives, as the circle shows, the individuals in the center, and that fourth circle, the teachers, the doctors, the PTs, the OTs, all the acronyms, those are the folks who spend the most time with that individual. And the gift of school is, how do we take those circle 2 and circle 3, our friends and families, and the participation, the organizations, the book clubs, the soccer clubs, how do we take those and be really intentional about how they become even closer to the individual, so that that fourth circle really remains on the outside, as opposed to becoming the circle that's actually the closest to the individual. So I share that as just a framing. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to share a story of a student that you see here was, I had her when she was in 2nd grade. She is now in 11th grade, which is also the gift of circles, is how people get to grow and evolve. And in 2nd grade, she came to the school I was teaching at. It was a full inclusion school. And her family had moved her from a sub-separate program in Boston that's substantially separate, a segregated program, a room full of only students with Down syndrome. And her family early on told me they did that because they actually had seen videos of folks with Down syndrome going to college. So they had this vision that something more could be possible for their child, and knew that one lever to pull was like, where does she spend most of her time? And she came to me, and she did not like me. She was less interested in males, and she saw me and read me as someone who presented as masculine, and she threw rocks at me. She thought, like, why would you ever be a girl and dress the way I do? Her, family saw this with love and humor too. And so I share that to say, like, it took us a long time for her and I to develop a close relationship. What I did know about her is that she loved to move, and dance, rhythm, like that was where she shined. So much of the beginning of the time in 2nd grade was her running out of the classroom. Her favorite word to me was no. It was hard. It was very, very challenging. But what I've learned from Micah's story is that when we nurture what kids' gifts are, adult humans' gifts are, that they get to feel a deeper sense of belonging. And with Kavana and with her family, we found ways to give her a sense of belonging in the classroom, but also in the world. And the Boston Ballet has an inclusive dance program. I found this out maybe in the 3rd, or when she was in 3rd or 4th grade, and address some of the barriers that go to doing programming, like the paperwork, filling out the forms, figuring out the financial aid, removing those things so that we could just get to the heart of it, which is like doing the dancing. And the next layer became like, how would she get to this program? Because it was in the suburbs, it wasn't downtown Boston. Her family, because of a trusting relationship that we were developing and a commitment that I was showing to the family, were open to me sort of reaching out to folks and saying, who can help sign up to drive Kavana and her sister, because her mom was working on the weekends, to the Saturday dance class. We found ways to pay folks, because things don't just, being nice is nice without intentional support doesn't just happen. And that's okay. That's okay. We live in a very wealthy country. We can figure this out. And over time, the folks who drove her to ballet ended up helping her older sister think about going to nursing school, helped her family address some immigration needs. The folks who drove her to the ballet class ended up coming to her performance, have become full inclusion teachers in the Boston Public Schools, gave her family the support so that they could go to a parent retreat conference a couple years later. When we center the students' interests, we don't know what else is possible, but we have to start with that interest, because that became the anchor, and then we could draw on other pieces. It wasn't easy. She's not doing dance right now, but it gave her a particular skill set and experience that gave her a deep sense of belonging. And when she had her concerts or performances with the Boston Ballet, the joy that her sister and mom had to see their daughter or sister on the stage with such dignity was such an important reminder for them to say, like, this is what I'm going to demand of the school system too. So families need to see their kids blossom in and outside of school so they know how to best be fierce advocates for them too. The next story also comes from when I was a teacher, and I knew that people don't, even even people who have similar values, who care about being nice and helping, don't know how to always help or show up for other people. And I had a student in my class one year who was a quieter student. His verbal communication was developing, and his family noticed that he wasn't really making peer connections. Everyone was just like near him. And because he didn't have behavior that was challenging, they would stay near him, but didn't know how to interact. And so I approached the parent and I said, would you be open to having a circle of friends? I connected with the special ed coordinator at the school and our social worker to think about how do we have this in a sustainable way. And after the parent was open to it, we drafted a letter, and the letter has lots of stuff in it, but the main 3 parts that I wanted to share was that the part of the letter was naming the difference and breaking the silence. There's no reason to hide behind anything. The clearer we are with adults and with kids about what's going on, the clearer we can get to the next part, which is like actually doing the wonderful work of building community. We described what a circle of friends is and does, and then we named, and this is the hard one, this isn't just something that's going to happen sometime, but here's the first meeting date. And so I sent this letter home with the mom's signature on it. I presented it to the class. I told the kids that we know that Tyler's working on developing his communication, and we're learning how best to communicate with Tyler. So we're going to be meeting once a week. We're going to have lunch together. We're going to play some games. Who would like to be interested in joining? And they didn't all say yes, which is actually a good thing. Like, I don't want a room full of everyone doing the same thing. I want kids to have choice. And so the kids who showed up, we played some games. We practiced how we wanted to communicate so that the student could be successful with us and vice versa. Later on, it led to another family in the class, because the mom's name was on it and the phone number, led to a play date. Are those 2 kids friends? I don't think so. He's also in 11th grade now. However, it helped the family see what work is going to have to go into making sure that this child has peer connections, and also having like a sigh of relief to know that when the structure happens, when the support is intentional, people do want to connect with my son. And that's really important too.
And if you, going back, thank you, Emma, it's so powerful. So moving, and so, I mean, that you drive home the point that we just never know, but if we're guided by the principles, we keep moving forward. And if you want to see how challenging Kevana was in 2nd grade with Emma, her 2nd grade teacher, watch Intelligent Lives, because she was just there saying no, no, no all the time. So these are tiny steps. And again, the worry is when we tell you the package deal, it looks so simple and easy, but these are many, many millions of moments as well. All right, so I know you probably have to go. So I think hopefully what's coming is this idea that circles are not a program. There is, somebody said, a party with a purpose. And they're always forever changing and shifting and coming and going. Before they have been in person. Now most of them are on Zoom, and I welcome, I think Micah's invitation, if you wanted to come to one of his Zoom meetings, is fine as well. So I want to just review in a sense the principles which you've heard shared, that this is about intention and invitation. It's about really focusing on the individual and what their interests are, which is not to say you don't nudge a little bit. I remember one of Micah's circle friends said, why don't you take a class on Jewish humor? And initially he said no, that was not something he was interested in, but he had a great time once he was nudged, I say, a little bit. You see the value of interdependency we've talked about, and the impact that it has on all of the members. We'll share a little bit, and Dave also to share that. And then the last I is to include a facilitator as well. So be creative in who you might invite. I'll just mention Micah used to go to the credit union and got friendly with people there, and he invited a couple of the credit union staff to be in his circle as well. One of the shopkeepers at a comic store was very engaged with one of the students who had a disability, and so the mother said to the shopkeeper, "Do you want to come to my son's circle?" Constantly engaging others as well. We talked about making sure that the individual with the disability, we honor their interests. The next slide shows a list of things in the early years that we gave to Michael when he was in his, or gave to the various people who knew Michael when he was in his 20s. So it was very concrete. This is a day of paper. Now you could do it on, your phone as well. So giving people ideas of what they could be doing. And I'm going to bring in the voice of Micah, and we're talking about his circle just for a moment. And then one of the kids who was in Micah's circle in elementary school will talk about his experience with the circle. I think it's about 2 minutes.
Circle of Friends is a group that started in, I think 3rd grade, and it's kids who got picked to hang out with me.
Circle of Friends was a small group of typical students who were going to work together to help Micah be included in the normal everyday curriculum of a public school. And we set out by just meeting once a week and discussing what Micah was doing that week, what he was going to do the next week, if he needed help and where he needed help, and who and how they would help him. And it actually evolved into where we weren't just a support group for Micah, we were a support group for each other.
I can't say I had any situations where,
those are things we didn't even know quite was that was really happening. We didn't know that the impact that it was having on the other students as well. So we keep bringing those kind of stories forward. So that as a reminder that we just don't know, but if we believe in that, it does have an impact on alls as well. Oops, now I need to figure out how to move this. And then include facilitator, the last I, and it could be school staff, consultant, service coordinator. We never facilitated the meetings. Emma did a couple of times, especially during COVID. And I'm pleased to highlight Dave and Patty, who generously facilitated an amazing group with Micah when his circle was really falling apart, I would say, or at least not being. Micah was almost ready to move back to Detroit, which surprised us. And so Micah brought together many people, and beautifully facilitated by these two individuals. And I think if I think back to it, Dave may have helped Micah do a map many, many years ago as well. So those are some of the sort of a summarizing of some of the ingredients, if you will, to the supporting a circle. So the facilitator can assist with the planning, keep the focus on the person, create that safe place as well. So I'm going to ask Linda your thoughts. We could go into a small group for about 7-8 minutes, or we can open up for questions. There's a few more slides of some final ideas. Any thoughts at all? Or Rich, anybody want to suggest what we do next or how we might move?
Janice, I'm wondering if I'm ready to do the small group thing, but I'm really wondering if you want to close with some of the slides you were looking at, and then we can give a moment. Let's see where our timing is then on either going to small group or pulling into questions.
Okay, great. And this might be what sort of you begin to think about for the next couple of minutes as well. I'll move into the next slides, but what is a next step or steps that you might begin to make? And it doesn't have to be practical. It could be philosophical or emotional as well. And then a takeaway that you might have as well. So just a couple of ideas that we wanted to highlight. Any age, it's never too late to start a circle. I think that's a myth that it has to start in 3rd grade. Initially, if you're thinking about doing it or at various phases, seeks out someone that you can talk to about it. So that you become clearer about what your concerns are, what your strengths are, what you feel passionate about. Make a list of the potential people, think outside the box. I've shared a couple of ideas as well. And someone had mentioned about not having peers. I thought of who are in the circle, they're more adults, but you go back to Kevana's story. When Kevana was encircled by some of Emma's colleagues who were older as well, and they got her to the ballet course. What happened as a result of that, getting her to the Boston Ballet, was really powerful. So maybe at various phases, it isn't same age peers. It might be other adults who have the capacity or interest as well. Create an invitation. Some of the resources you will receive from Jack and Linda will have sample letters, texts. Initially you want to plan that gathering and host regular check-ins. Keep the focus on the person. And this slide's important. This is something we've learned, is that not everybody's going to participate in the circle, come to all the meetings. Sometimes it might just be the person who says, I'll drive Micah to the basketball games. And that's an important person. Or it might be what is called a 6-minute journal. Rebecca does this with Micah, did this with him during COVID times. And they did this on Zoom. She'd ask the question of Micah, what happened during the day? What did you see or observe? She listed that. One thing that you heard. And then she always drew an image. She'd ask Micah, what do you want me to draw? She's great at drawing as well. And so that continued for a year and a half, almost every week. She did the 6-minute journals. We had another friend who did yoga class with Micah on Zoom as well. So knowing that there's not one way to participate. This takes risks, coming out of your comfort zone. We've already talked about asking for help, nudging, celebrating, honoring, having parties. When we go to Syracuse in the past, we've actually had gatherings where we had dinner with everyone just to have a good time and be grateful for what is going on. And that capacity to think about, are things going okay? What do we need to look at and address? So I'll read this quote. I want to live in a world where help is asked for and given freely, not all the time, without guilt or pity or scorekeeping, but with a generosity of spirit that comes with the knowledge that we need each other, that no one of us is really on our own. I think what I'm going to do is, and share with me if you want to take it in a different direction. I want to tell a short story that really moves my heart, and then we'll open up for questions and comments and answers as well. Okay, so here's the story. Micah had to fly from, I don't know, Syracuse back to Detroit. And at this point, he didn't like flying. He wasn't able to fly with anyone for some reason. He was by himself. And we were at the airport learning that there was terrible turbulence in the plane, the whole area. We weren't sure what was going to happen. The whole airport was sort of terrified at that moment. The good news is it landed safely. We were in the baggage claim. Micah came down the escalator. He looked pretty distraught. So immediately we hugged him and, comforted him and all that good stuff that you do. And then I asked him the question, so Micah, like, how did you get through that? What did you do? It must have been so scary. And he turned to me and he said, well, Mom, I just told the person who was sitting next to me that I was scared. And I asked if I could hold his hand. And I was blown away. That's the world I want to be able to live in, to be vulnerable enough to ask, knowing that we're not always going to get it. We might get something we didn't expect, but that tenderness and his ability to be able to do that. So when he needed open heart surgery, he said to me, Mom, you better get your own circle of support to help you get through that, which happened. So, all right, so here we go to, I think I can stop sharing. I don't think I need to do this anymore. And we could just open it up to questions, comments, thoughts. And if you have your own experience, there's so many experienced people here, wise folks, share them as well. So we'll look for the raised hands. I see Kim, a dear friend,
wow,
who has done so much to create circles.
Oh, this is so wonderful. Wow. I learned a lot today. And one of the things that I really learned is that this is so holistic. I never thought about, I always thought about the focus of the circle, which it is, being on the individual who is being supported. But what was new for me today is that the circle actually supported the whole family. So the story about Emma as a, as a sibling who also needed her own space, and you all found a way to do it, because a lot of this is problem solving. And then Micah telling you, you better get your own circle. I mean, just that in itself to me was just really wonderful to hear. And lastly, I'll just say the intention. Intention is just like key. Intention to be human and to love. And I think when you have that intention, then we can find ways to do anything.
Thank you. And I'm going to add that comments like what Kim has given us over the years, you may not know this, Kim, but you strengthen our sense of how important it is to have circles, because you reflect back to us what you have seen and witnessed as well. So that reciprocity just keeps twirling. Grateful.
Now that I've composed myself, thank you. When you start a circle, this is a real practical question. How much do you not involve, but like when you made the potential list of circle participants, I would assume, but I'd like your input. Do you involve the individual in everything? In other words, you're not doing this without Micah or the individual. I would assume, but I'd like your comments on how do you do it with the individual?
I assume that Emma's gone to be a principal and is no longer here. Okay. All right. And Rich, please share ideas as well. I think we've made a very strong commitment to involve Micah right from the beginning. Now, I'm saying, but that has been something I had to grow into. Initially, years ago, if there was going to be some challenges, personally, I'd go, I don't want Micah at that meeting or that gathering, because, maybe things will be said that are hard or uncomfortable. I had to grow in my acceptance of that if Micah was going to grow, he should be involved. And many of you know the quote, nothing about me without me. And Micah learned that, and he would say to me, nothing about me without me, Mom. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean that every single time, I mean, I've had conversations with people outside of the circle. And I always say, if you're uncomfortable with me talking a little bit about what's going on in the circle, or you think that we shouldn't have this conversation, just let me know. I want to have this conversation because I want to get clearer on what my own ideas are. And if you and I can have a conversation, then maybe I'll be clear, and then I can talk to Micah about that. So it's a careful. I have to be careful around it. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Marguerite. So let me know.
Yeah, you're answering it. And I guess what I'm hearing you say is, yes, of course, Micah's involved or the person is involved, except when there's a reason, a good reason for him not to be, like you said, you needed some clarification on something, and then you were going to get back to Micah. I guess I worry that as little ones, you maybe don't want the person involved, but as they get older, maybe they want to be involved, and you certainly want them involved. And I guess there might be different stages even as adults. So that's what I was wondering, what's the interplay and the changes? And sometimes the person wants to be involved, sometimes you think they shouldn't be, that kind of thing. But as a general rule, I'm hearing you say the person must be involved. I think you say that.
Yeah, I think I'm learning that, and but I have gotten more comfortable, or it took me time to become more comfortable saying, I need to think about this with someone who's in the circle or next to the circle. And then I can have that conversation with Micah. And in fact, now I'll even say at times, and I keep saying and really it's very much a Rich and Rich and me together, but I can even say to Micah, we're thinking about this issue. Would you be okay if we talk to your case manager first and then talk to you about it? So Richie has his hand up, so please.
I just want to give it and I think what you're focusing on is it changes over time. To use Janice's favorite word, it's a dance. It's a dance of respecting and eliciting his comments and reflections. At the same time, knowing that it's very common for us to have suggestions, and we know that Micah will initially say no. So, for example, when whoever can get Intelligent Lives living in Canada and looking for the movie, you'll see a comment after he gets this certificate of disability studies from Syracuse. I ask him, "Are you going back to?" You moving back to Michigan? He says, no, but I'll take the discussion. I said, what are you going to do? He says, well, I'll take it back to my circle for discussion. So he has a place to go to get feedback. The other example, and I see that Linda put it in there about this boundaries. So now he's 39. So it's really important. So over the last 3 years, he's been very clear to set boundaries for us. So when we come visit, and in many ways, not much different from when I was 25, 35. What I wanted from my mother was, don't ask me too many questions about this or that, about my health or about what I'm doing. And he's very clear to say that. So we had an incident, and I want to share it, where he made it very clear we could not ask about things about his health or his money. We should talk with the whole team or send him an email, and his staff would discuss it. We walked into his house, opened up the medicine chest, and there were all these pills there. And they were not the kind of pills you want to keep in your house. And I freaked. And I freaked because I didn't know why they were there. And it took us a week to figure it out. But eventually it was because he had all these different medical things. So you get opioids and you get all this stuff. He wasn't taking them, but he not returned them. He got upset. We made an appointment with his doctor behind his back. And we were really embarrassed. But and he found out, as he should have. We never met with the doctor. But what happened was we had to say to him, whether it was him or Emma, we're allowed to get upset and we're allowed to freak out as well. And that's part of growing up, that he may have boundaries, but we also have to take the risk to say what's going on here. And it was a very, very high level conversation. So he's 39, and I want to emphasize that he is 39 years old with a particular disability, and he's able to, you see him for what he is at this point in his life. And every person is different. No story is the same of what that relationship is, or those fears are, or those boundaries.
I see that Susan Fitzmaurice has, thank you, Rich. Thank you. Yes. It's good to be embarrassed in front of a big group of people. Susan, if you'd like to share.
And then Jennifer.
So Jennifer is here, and
Okay.
Susan, I would also, I can bring you on and you can each ask your questions. I just need for you to turn on your video, Susan. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't show up even on the video, but I'll try. I was going to mention, I always have Teddy present. He isn't always participating, but he's present. So when he was really little, I would have him coloring. So sit at the table with us. He would go to IEPs. He really wasn't involved in very early on IEPs, but you're going to sit at the table and you're going to color. And if you want to wander off for a while and then come back to the table, that's okay. But there were meetings that were about him, and they knew they were about him, that was important for him. But I always think that the biggest part of it was that then everybody at that table could not forget that was about him. We weren't talking about this abstract person, especially in IEPs, that you forget that there's a person that you're talking about. So it's important that he was in the room. They could see him, and they had to show care, because if they didn't, they'd be called up on it.
Thank you, Susan.
I understand that you have not ever been directly involved in the circles, like in the actual meetings, but I wondered, especially as when he was younger and maybe had that changed, how you supported whatever came out of the circles for him, because I imagine there were issues of transportation or money or something where family involvement might have been an important factor.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you for sharing ideas. We have attended some of the Zoom circles, but not a lot, and we don't facilitate them. In the beginning, in those earlier years, I think the connection was with the social worker. If there was something in particular that was going on that needed to be addressed, say travel or whatever, we had that kind of connection. But we also, in middle school, started to involve the parents. We had a meeting when the kids entered middle school and invited the parents. I was very scared to do that. I think it comes from ableism. I don't know, my own insecurities. But anyways, several parents came and they helped brainstorm things that the kids could do in middle school with the circle. And some of those parents actually help facilitate, like the transportation to the games and things like that. And I will tell you very quickly, in middle school, the kids, we had no idea this was going on. They were upset with this new social worker who was facilitating the group, because apparently he was making it be about Micah's problems and Micah's mistakes and what Micah couldn't do. And the kids on their own, a couple of them, went to their parents and said, we don't like this social worker. And the parents went to the principal. We had no idea that this was going on until much later. So what's the moral of the story? Keep inviting people in and asking, because things will happen that you don't always expect. So I think that's sort of, we had those, the parent connection and with the professional. Great question. Maybe we have time for one more question or comment, Rich, if you had anything.
Unless there's somebody else who'd like to share, I guess I wanted to share a few points. One is, and Emma shares this context. We really, really have to believe we do not know what people can become. We do not know their potential. And that takes a lot of risk. We use the phrase thinking out of the box, all that stuff very simply, but it's based on we don't know human potential. The second one is, I think Emma and Janice mentioned the word ableism. The values of ableism and individualism are a violence towards all the people we're talking about, as well as talking with and ourselves, because that's what holds us back from creating this culture of love. And the third point is that Emma, as a teacher, and she shared it very clearly, and parents, to become organizers and advocates and creators of community is much more, is what inclusion gives us the opportunity to do. And it's the gift that Jack and Linda and everybody with part of their team have given us. This is an amazing framing to create community, because it combats all the values that destroy us day in and day out. So I just want to say thank you to everybody here, and a special thank you to my loving wife, Janice, who is so cool doing all this shit. Excuse me. Whoops. I'm not supposed to use that word.
Carry on. We're so grateful for all of you and your ideas and thoughts. The best birthday party for Emma.
Okay, I'm going to bring on, Maureen is already there. The folks in Louisville, Kentucky, Mattingly Edge have a group of families there. And I'm bringing on you, Michelle. And let's see if we can't jointly manage with the few remaining minutes. Whatever folks really want to share or ask. And while we're doing that, I'm going to put a few things in the chat about where y'all will be able to find resources. Maureen.
Hi. Yeah, my comment was more of a comment than a question. Someone mentioned about the support that a circle can give to a family. And I just want to say how supportive circles can be to each other, to the other participants in the circle. And one of the things we observed, or I observed with the circle when it was functioning, and the important thing you both mentioned, Janice and Rich, about not being facilitators, is it's very hard to get out of being a facilitator if you become a facilitator as a parent. It's so important. I think that's one thing I would always say to family members: don't facilitate your young person's circle, because it's just a rod to beat your back with. They need to be independent of you in every possible way, and facilitation in particular. And one way I noticed this really benefiting is, at one point my son was excluded from a club run by people with learning difficulties because he pushed somebody. And his circle stepped right in and said, okay, the facilitator said, okay, Maureen, you need to step aside. And they contacted the club and told the club who they were and made decisions with the club about how my son could be re-included, what the club required to enable that, and insisted that his being excluded was not acceptable. And it was much more powerful to be done without me, and for the other circle to realize their power. So that's that's what I wanted to share. Thank you. It's been great being here.
Thank you. Mattingly Edge families.
Are we up? So I just had a question about the facilitator, following up on Maureen's comment in terms of, is that typically a paid person, and what is the agreement? Does Micah pay to have a facilitator, interview them, and decide on it? Is that a paid role, I guess, is really what I'm asking.
Yes, well, it should be, well, people can volunteer. Typically, we have found that it is a paid, or I don't know, I guess realistically, it could be either. The issue with volunteers sometimes is that the commitment may be not as stable, although then funding is an issue. Micah, in this case, he co-facilitates with what's sort of like a service coordinator. So mostly that's the arrangement. During COVID, he and Emma facilitated together. So it varies. I think that there are services that can provide funding depending on what kind of supports the person gets. So little.
It just seems like that would need to be kind of a role that, right, you can rely on, and people have a bit of training in it and that kind of thing. And then I had a follow-up question if you don't mind. So we're beginning to build a circle of support around my 4.5-year-old grandson. And I just wondered if you had any advice about, just any thoughts about if you had started that early, what should we know? We're slowly building it. We have 3 folks now, and we meet regularly. We meet monthly. But I just wondered if you had any advice about starting with a child that age.
Well, there's people on this Zoom that are probably more experienced. I tell you what came to my mind first is just have fun.
Yes.
Is not to overthink it, to grow into it, and not to maybe force yourself so much to think about the future or problem solving, is really build relationships, connections, belonging.
Well, that's part of why we're starting small and just kind of casually, adding folks. And I love the comment somebody else made about the coloring book, because at my grandson's meetings, it's important for him to be there, but so we end up meeting at a table that he uses as his train table. So he's playing with the trains while everybody's trying to eat, and it's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun. So
I just want to share that what you're doing, and 4-year-olds, you're recreating the extended family.
Yes.
And we have destroyed the extended family to the nuclear family, to living alone, because that's where we've been for the last 50, 75 years. So what you're doing is creating it, and that's what we all have to do. That's what community is. It comes from extended family, and then we all moved away, and now we're realizing this ain't working this way.
Well, Rich, and thank you for this. It's really been wonderful. Thank you.
We'd love to hear how yours evolve over time. I know we can learn.
I just want to lean in and say, I know that there may be some folks who have to leave, and we're really grateful. Janice and Rich, then you can stay. We love hearing these questions, and we're thrilled, Michelle, to have you contribute here. And we know for folks that the recording will be available, and it will include this, yes, overtime. And so we're grateful for that.
Deep gratitude to everyone as well, and Linda and Jack for always asking. That's a good thing. We're learning from you over and over again.
Comments. And we'll follow up with the link and all that good stuff. And Michelle, we look forward to your reflections and comment here.
So I wanted to build a little bit on what Rich was saying around the whole culture of love. It reminded me, and I was reminded of this. Please let me know if you can hear me, because I kind of have to lean in at my laptop. Okay. When I did a presentation virtually to the FAO conference this past Saturday, I kind of was reminded of those early years and kind of wanting to talk a bit, you know, how we come full circle when we look at a vision at an early time and then look at our sons or daughters now, right? Or and how we held to that. But my daughter was very, very young and very medically fragile when I first heard about Circles of Support, which was at the Rower Institute, and listening to Judith Snow and Marcia, and actually Rose Galati also talk about inclusion, and very much really resonated with me. So in response partly to the last woman who talked, and into Richard talking about I don't know if I ever said Richard before, Rich talking about the culture of love. I went home and shared about the idea of Circle of Friends to some of my friends, and we are in a small rural community. And the idea of the possibility of our daughter being included, we were already involved with a little play school, and I would, in our neighborhood, and I would go and be her help. But anyway, just to wrap it up quickly, a number of parents. So the first circle didn't involve Lisa, who had a lot of medical issues, who was really tiny, but it was called Lisa's Circle of Friends, but it was more probably a circle for the family. And it was about how will we educate folks about the possibilities for Lisa to go to the small rural school and be included from day one. And when I approached Marcia and Judith and Rose about some slides that had been shown, Rose's story, maybe some of Judith Catherine Waronko's, they said, we'll help you. Maybe it was mainly Marcia. We'll help you. We'll give you the slides, because this Circle of Friends was meeting and talking about ways that Lisa could be more involved in the community and be part of things. And they wanted to hold living room meetings with people from Woodsley who could learn about possibilities. And they said, we'll help you do that if you promise to help others in rural areas have their kids included in school. And I'm sure that was certainly a message I took to heart, and I did do that for many years and over the years. So that Circle of Friends met frequently, but not with our daughter. It really was purposefully on some how-tos and engage other people. My daughter was always around and in the house, but her stage of life was very fragile. And they spoke with over 100 everyday people from the Woodsley community in living rooms and showed the possibilities of inclusion for somebody who looked like Lisa, who was Maria, somebody like Catherine, to the point where they had signatures signed on a petition. Mainstreaming had become the philosophy in that board, except for kids with extreme physical, medical, developmental situations. But I walked into the school, said I wanted to register my daughter, and there were all these folks behind it. And I think without that circle, which for that intention didn't really include Lisa in the initial phases, was still a very good purpose for having. And she was probably 3.5 when we began that work. They were also instrumental in a family becoming a break for us 1 weekend a month from the church, and donations would come in, and they asked the priest to hold them, and they would give a stipend. So they were very involved in Lisa becoming part of the neighborhood school, and Lisa getting a break with a family in our community. Extremely instrumental. The next steps, of course, were Lisa being included and part of things. So there was a time and a moment, and I do think it was effective. And I think it created this huge capacity for love and care in the community. To this day, she's totally 100% respected and included in this little rural town of Woodsley. So that's my little story.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, I really want to appreciate, thank you, Maureen. Maureen is leaving from the UK. Well, so I guess that there was at least a couple hours worth of conversation. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again for sharing, and yeah, we really appreciate it. Jack, we'll give you the last word, and then we'll kiss the few remaining folks goodbye. Thanks for hanging in, everyone, and thanks so much for your generosity, Janice and Rich, Emma and Micah.
Thank you to everyone, but I want to add a little twist on recruiting facilitators, because we got recruited. And this is one of the great gifts of Micah, because Micah at one point decided that yet again, Linda and I he needed a map, and you guys are going, so he phoned and said, you have to come to Syracuse and do my map. And we said, oh, I'd love to, but we're booked to go to Australia like the next day from your plan. And Micah said, oh, okay. And then he phoned and emailed every day, relentlessly. And we ended up driving to Syracuse, having a wonderful day, driving back and getting on the plane to go to Australia, because Micah was wonderfully relentless. And that's one of Micah's great gifts, but it's a gift that's deeper than that. People are recruiters for inclusion when we give them a chance. So thank you, Janice and Rich. Thank everybody for this. Circles are fundamental to our survival, always have been, always will be, but they've fallen out of habit. And we need to renew that habit and rebuild the extended families that held the world together since the dawn of time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for the diehards who stayed. It's been so lovely to be with you. And I was going to thank you again to Janice and Rich. You were, thank you for all the work I know you put into being able to share this story. It's really so powerful. Thank you.
Truly our honor.
Thank you.
All right.
May the force
be well.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Be unrelenting.